Welcome to Illo Talk. I'm Cory Kerr, and this is episode 124. Today I'm going to talk about something that took me a little bit of time to figure out, but it was kind of a breakthrough for me, and I'm going to try to practice it more. And it's going from coarse to fine. Meaning that doing super rough, general, broad stroked things before you start noodling in on the details. I'm going to show you this page, and we'll create it in real time. But the basic gist of this is that I start with some colored pencils, and then I go to 40% gray marker, and then I do some blacks, and I finish it off with a little bit of colored pencils. This is a rough composition that I will actually scan in and then rework over in Photoshop and move some things around. And then I'll bring this in to ink it for kind of like a final pass. And so I'll take this whole thing, and I'm going to take the whole thing, and I'm going to lower the transparency of it so it's almost barely visible. Turn everything blue, and then I'll print that out on a page later. But today I want to talk about this idea of going from a coarse to a fine. So if you've ever done, some of you may not have done this, but old school radios, you used to do a coarse adjustment, and then there was a smaller knob that would do a fine adjustment. And so the coarse adjustment gives you you're roughly in the general area of where you need to do, and then the fine adjustment you fine tune. That's what fine tuning comes from, is you're tuning into a radio station with the fine knob after you get roughly where you need to be with the coarse knob. And so this technique has really helped me out, and I go from coarse to fine. And this is nowhere near fine, but it's less coarse. And so we'll start with kind of big, blocky, rough shapes, and then we'll kind of fine tune from there until we get to this point. Let me show you a couple things that I've been working on. And so this would be an example of kind of detail work. I was just kind of experimenting a little bit more with a brush, and working on kind of getting the tree bark. I still haven't nailed the leaves, but this is more of what I was talking about, right? And so let me show you the whole page here. At the end of my sketchbook here, so it's kind of, you can see it's a little noisy. I still need to figure some things out, but basically I start with kind of a 50% gray marker, and then I go in really fast and kind of select major shapes. I didn't love that one, and so I played with it a little bit more. I really wanted to accentuate kind of the floating island feel. And so you can kind of see here that situation. But notice how I've just got big, giant, broad gray strokes and kind of fill in areas with that. And then I'll come in later with black. I'm actually going to do this today live to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Here's an example of blocking out a page. This is Scarlett was drawing with me. Here's an example of blocking out a page with just gray. Not terribly happy. I was trying to get the facial expressions in there. And here are some sketches that started in gray. You can kind of see kind of the large blocks. I'm trying to go from light, dark, light, dark, light, dark to add layers of detail. And you can kind of see a couple of the different scenes. I'm trying to look at different angles of things. And so this one kind of started here. And then I kind of changed the angle to a lower camera angle so that we would have some more sky and things like that. And then I was, again, playing with kind of looking down, kind of an overarching, establishing shot. So that's kind of basically what I'm doing. Here's a real rough page as well. This is me just trying to introduce kind of the wife, and she's a bit grumpy, and so she gets a grumpy face. I keep moving the page in the wrong direction, but I feel like I've nailed her character design better than his so far because she's really shape based. So anyway, so I'm still working on that. But that's basically it. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take a thumbnail, and then I'm going to take my markers, which I'll show you in a minute here once I change the camera angle. And I'm just going to talk through my thought process of why I'm making certain decisions, and we'll see if we can get a page, kind of what I call the comp, kind of the compositional layout. The layout comp. And so it won't be any line work and there won't be any details or anything, but we'll kind of do this. We'll do this comp today. First off, I want to start by talking about tools. And this is one of my favorite markers. I don't know how well you can see this. And unless you speak Japanese, it doesn't matter, I guess. But this is a Kuretake 55 felt tip pen. It's got a fine... Let me move this so you get some contrast. It's got a fine tip on one end, which is fairly rigid, but it kind of snaps a bit, and I really like that. And then it's got a very flexible fat tip on the end here, and it's pretty cool. They're not terribly expensive, and they last a little ways. I literally don't know what any of this says. So if anybody knows, there you go. So this will be the second marker that I use. The other tools that I'm going to use are, I try to have this either be first or second. This is a Prismacolor gray, and this is a cool gray 40%. And I try to keep it under 50%. I don't know, 30-40 is fine, really, because you're just trying to get some things. I don't actually do a lot with value, as far as value contrast, but I just try to get in the, I don't know, the basic colors. What I like about this is it has a fine point as well, right? And for what I'm doing when I'm going coarse to fine, I don't use the fine point much at all. The reason that I like using this marker a lot is because it's got this giant, fatty, chiseled tip. And what it does is it allows you to cover large areas really quickly, as well as getting in there and forcing you to not be so precious, because you can't get detailed with it. And other than that, I might throw in some Kohl Erase Prismacolor colored pencils, just because for some reason whenever I use graphite and it's black, it just kind of turns out I start getting detailed. But psychologically, I've been able to the eraser came out of that one. I've been able to convince myself that I can sketch with blue, green, or red. Okay, so I'm gonna try another landscape on this one. I'm gonna throw these off to the side, but no, that's where I'm reaching. And this thing is called a gridded cocoon. And I don't know if you can tell in the light, but it's just like a web of kind of bungee-like elastic flat surfaces with rubber stitching in it. And it holds everything in place. I love this thing so much. And they're not expensive either. All right. So basically, I'm going to try to... I did some research. I'm going to try to get this basic layout here that I've got. I want to get that a little bit more solidified on what exactly I'm doing on this page. This will be kind of the establishing shot for the homestead, right, where the man and the wife live. And I did a map that I showed you guys the other day. It looks like this, and so you can kind of see the basic layout here. Here's their home. There's a path to a little dock. There's a lake. There's a stream and some cliff faces and a forest. And so I'm always keeping that in mind as I'm drawing new things, because I want to make sure that no matter where I move my camera, that it's pointing at stuff that makes sense. And so I'm gonna attempt to do this again. Yeah, so we're just gonna start. I'm gonna start real basically with some red. And I want it to look a little bit like we are entering this area. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some stuff on the sides as if we're like coming in. And so I'm going to do kind of like a cliff face over here. And there might be some bushes or whatever. And I really kind of liked how this thumbnail turned out. So I'm just going to reference back and forth to it. And so we'll have kind of an area where the edge of the water is. I'm doing this super light, and then I actually might change this up a little bit. I'm gonna have some kind of bush or plant or foliage up here, and so I'm kind of trying to get this nice saddle situation, and then just to show off some detail. I think I might have kind of the edge of a trunk, and then we'll kind of frame this in. I want to make sure that I leave room for the text, since this is a picture book, and so I'm going to kind of come up and over. Okay, and then I'm going to give myself a little bit of a bridge, and that's going to have kind of a vanishing point to the home. There'll be this, all right, and then our house is going to be roughly here. And then I'm going to fill the rest of the space with mountains, but I don't want a perfectly horizontal line just splitting the page up the middle. And so I'm going to actually kind of, there's a curving shape up here, so I'm going to repeat that curving shape, and we'll kind of build that out. All right. So now that I've given myself a little bit of some red line, I don't know if you guys can see that terribly well. You'll be able to see the next steps a little bit more. Now I'm just going to kind of fill in large blocky shapes to kind of give myself an idea of a little bit of value, but mostly just where the edges of things are. And so this is going to be kind of the cliff face here. And I want to be careful where my home is, so I'm not going to do too much detail in the cliff face. I'm going to move on over here to kind of the edge of this bush. And so kind of bush edges, and then I want some kind of grass areas, and then we'll have this tree, but I'm actually going to twist it a little bit more than I had it in my, because I don't want two mirrored and parallel lines. And so I'm going to break into this space, which also gives me an opportunity to kind of give you kind of the bonsai feel. And so I'm going to come up and over, and then I'm going to break back in, twist around, and we'll have one offshoot up here and a main branch. And so this is going to be a main branch here. Bottom side of that is going to be colored, and we'll have this kind of break out like that, which will give us some foliage. And so I'm going to kind of just kind of bust in some of this action here, kind of like that. And so I kind of want the top of this to be enclosed, because I really want it to feel like we are entering an area, and so I want it to be almost like framed in. And so we'll have our tree framing it on the top, and then on the other side, I'm going to have some of those dripping vines. I don't know what these are called, but I've seen them a lot in Hiroshi. I can't remember his name. Whenever I'm on camera, I forget people's names. Anyway, the dude's awesome. I'll show you some of his work and put his name on the screen, because I'm using him kind of as a bit of inspiration on this. A lot of these trees, they're going to have little broken bits. And whenever I start to do this, I remind myself that I am not detailing right now, so I need to stop doing that. Okay, so I've got kind of this big, I'm going to have these big kind of leaves come in, and I want to avoid some tangents. And so I'm actually going to come in a little bit here, and I'm going to have the forest kind of totally approach this area. And so I'm going to have kind of the forest crawl around here like this. I'll have some peaks and some kind of like that. And then you'll see little breaks where you get the trunks coming in. Just a little hint of trunks. And then we can kind of just shade the general area because the bottom of that is going to be a little bit more shaded than everything else. I don't want to do it too much. This is going to be bright, and sometimes I will mark that just so that I kind of know. And so in this case, bright's going to be red, just so I know that this is going to have some contrast. And that just makes inking it a lot easier. And so I really want that edge to pop out. And then behind those, I'm going to have just a series of mountains. I'm going to look back at my thumbnail again just to get an idea. But I like these kind of floating world, kind of Edo period idea. And so you'll see I've got forest here, mountains, and then there's layers of mountain fog, mountain fog, mountain fog that kind of oscillate back and forth. And then we'll go into some clouds. And so I want to do that, but I want to do it in a way that isn't terribly noisy. And so I'm kind of establishing this hard-edged, straight line, almost a Chuck Jones, Wile E. Coyote landscape a little bit, and there will be like bushes and things that come out. And so a lot of these edges are just going to be kind of just harder peaks. Kind of come off like that. And then we'll have kind of some rolling fog come in like this, and then we'll have kind of another series comes up a little bit over here, and then some more rolling fog, and we'll do one more, and these can get a little bit larger and come down. Okay, now that I've got a bunch of different lines here, I'm actually just going to fill in the mountains to give myself an idea of the basic value contrast. And what I'm trying to do in this situation is I'm trying to come in and do, I'm going to do the edges here real quick. This is an older marker and it's starting to dry up. That's okay. That helps you not be precious with your drawings. Come up right up to the edge of that tree. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to switch back and forth between light and dark, light and dark, light and dark, so that I have an opportunity to do depth just by showing layers of detail. I worked for a company that did themed environments for a while there. And one thing I learned from them was showing layers of detail. And so this won't make a lot of sense at this stage, but I'm still kind of just working it in. I've got my major shapes. Now I just need to come in and I'm going to get my bridge here. I'm going to have him fishing off the side. We've got kind of this action, and then we kind of follow down. And so I want to point him in this direction. And so he's going to kind of hang off here with his hat. That's a little big. And his feet. And then we'll have his fishing pole. And then we can do some ripples. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of mock in the, I don't know what these are called yet, but I will know everything about them soon, because I don't want to be disingenuous. I'm going to have some little stripes. Okay, that'll come into the water like this, and then we'll have some more water reflections, and then we're going to kind of make sure, now if I'm not careful, the edge of this gateway is going to hit the edge there. And so I'm going to drop this down so that I don't get tangents. So that the edge of the water is going to kind of jog in a little bit. Okay, and I might add some some more bushes over here. There's going to be kind of some rocks along this. We'll make it kind of a little bit of a drop off before it hits the water. Kind of like that. Okay, and then these guys are poor, and so I did some research during this time period. I'm trying to make this kind of a timeless tale, but prior to some Chinese influence, there were two types of houses or dwellings, and the more rural people would dwell in something called a pit dwelling, and so it's got a lot of grow over, and I'm actually going to have it break this plane a little bit. Either that, or I'm going to kind of leave it. I think I'm going to leave it so there's some negative space so that it becomes a focus. And so it's going to have it's got a little dormer up here. And then there's a bit of a flat kind of overhang. And then there's kind of this like hobbit door that kind of goes like this. And then the rest of it is kind of this grassy mound. Like that. And so this is going to, if we're doing proper perspective, this is going to come down. The inside of this is going to be darker. The inside of that is going to be, and then a shadow under here. So, and then I'm going to have in my character backstory, this guy who is a woodcutter does very ornate work. And so he's got this kind of path that leads to his dock. Okay. And then I do want to add a little bit of, I want to add something that breaks up the sky just a touch. And so I'm going to come in here and do some more of those dripping plants. And so we'll kind of just have these kind of cross over and break the plane a little bit, just to add, anytime I can do anything to overlap, to add depth and detail, I try to do that in certain areas. And so we'll come in here on the right side and we'll add some shadowing. Okay, now this kind of, to anybody who isn't me, I would imagine looks like a giant mess. But what I'm actually going to do now is define it a little bit more. And so I'm going to grab this, but I still don't want to be precious. And so I'm going to use the larger thing and force myself to not draw detail. And so right now I'm going to just define major shapes to make sure that they're okay. And so I just come along with some edges here, and I want to get some kind of ideas of kind of how the different areas are going to come through in values, and this is where I can add in a little bit of, maybe there's a little tuft of grass sticking out here, maybe there's a bush. Okay, just to give it some kind of craggy, moss dripping deals and whatnot, but not too much. So we kind of get that side of the face out. And then I realized that I didn't leave a ton of room for text. And so what I'm actually going to do is this bush, I think I'm going to either have my text down here, or I might drop some of the stuff that's up the top. I think that's what I'll do. So I'm going to have this be a little bit lower, so that we can kind of have some text kind of at the top, or maybe raise this up. We'll see how it goes. So this bush is okay. So I'm going to kind of come in here like this, and we'll kind of do just a couple little leaves. And then that's the end of that plant. And then we've got a different plant that's going to come in here and kind of give us some kind of fern situation. Maybe this is flowering of some kind. Okay, some more foliage on the edge there. And then we're going to break into kind of a tree. And so this got really muddy here in the middle. And so I'm just going to kind of come in, wiggle my hand back and forth so that we know that it's a rough, barky edge. But again, no detail, so I'm going fast. I do want to kind of define how some of these branches attach and twist a little bit. And that needs to anchor to something, so I'm going to take that around here. And I do want to add a little bit of a cliff face on the edge there, just so there's a visual. I always try to give everything a visual reason to exist. And so even if you just hint at stuff, it'll help the mind settle a little bit. I always feel like if something is just there and there's not a visual reason for it to be there, that oftentimes that can become very distracting. Okay, so we've got our basic frame. I'm just going to come in and map in a few of these branches and leaves. So these kind of stick up. They're going to go behind that. They drip a little bit. Okay, and so I've got a lot more sketching and ink work to do before I feel comfortable doing this style of leaf, but I come up. I'll have that come over. We'll just assume that breaks through like that. All right, and then we'll have these guys drip. They're a little bit rounder, but they're going to come down. I'm trying to pay close attention at this point to any tangents that I might be creating, because edge tangents, where they come up and bump up against something and look unintentional, those are some of the easiest ones to do. And one of the reasons that this technique has been so great for me is that when I focus on the detail, I lose sight of the composition. And so I try to get in some of that composition earlier so that when I do the detail, I can just have fun. For me, the detail is the fun part. So I'm just going to kind of reinforce some of these trunks. And then I'll come in and kind of just edge out the forest here so we kind of know definitively where that is. And then I'm going to come in and kind of, right? And so that helps because that separates that black line separates that from mountains. Come in, we'll do some straight, jaggy lines for mountains and cliff faces. And then we'll define the fog a little bit more, the rolling fog. We'll come in a little bit more with the mountains again. Rolling fog. Now, as a kid, I would feel like something like this would be wasteful. I had this thing, and I don't know what it is, where drawing the same thing more than once felt like I was wasting or cheating, or something was going on. But I find that it helps. Okay, trying to stop myself from doing details. You guys got me doing some details there. Okay, now I want to make sure that this makes sense, and so this is going to cross in front of our character and continue on under the bridge, and then we've got our bridge here. This will come up and continue underneath, and then the bridge will disappear all the way back that direction. And then I just caught a tangent there, and so I'm gonna lower his head even further, so that we don't have a bump tangent there. And then we'll have him sitting with his feet hanging off. And we'll have our pole here and our line. And some ripples. The ripples are not actually that important at this stage, but it kind of helps me remember that that's water, in case I forget at some point. And then get our crossbars again, at this stage, I just want to reinforce the shapes. And so I'm not terribly worried about too much here as far as, I don't even really need to do this part because that doesn't matter as much. I am going to give myself some boards. And those are way off in perspective, that's fine. But this will be darker. And this will come in. Okay, we'll come in and we'll do the edge. Now I noticed that the way that I did this in the gray marker, that the edge of the fishing pole and the cliff face that leads up to the thing, that leads up to the lake, they cause a tangent, and so I'm actually going to shorten that up a little bit to give that a little bit of room. You have two choices in that situation. You can overlap so it looks intentional, or you can give it some negative space so it looks intentional. But if it's just right there and it's neither overlapping or given some space, it just causes conflict. Visual conflict in a way that isn't what you want. Okay, so we'll just kind of scribble in our cliff face there. There's going to be some water that bounces off that. Maybe we have a little bit more forest in here, I think is what I was trying to do with that. Okay, and then we're going to come in and we're going to do, here is our house. So we got edges. And then this is kind of some hay. So it's not a solid line. And that is kind of that. Okay, now the fun part for me is I will, and this is not as necessary because this is good enough to know what I need to do. But sometimes just for satisfaction, I'll go in with the finer point here, and I'll kind of texture some things a little bit. This also will give you just a touch of an idea of value. And notice how just a few of those lines kind of gives that a darker value against the backdrop there. And so this is going to be kind of a medium value. And then this is going to be bright. I'm going to kind of just give myself an idea here of value. This is actually going to be pretty bright in most places except where it's in shadow. And so anywhere where, let's see, I think I've got to decide on the light source, but that for me comes later. But I want bright edges. And then on this side, we're going to go bark lines to cause the shadow underneath. And on the far side. And then behind here will be darker because it'll be mountains. And so this is darker. This is forest. So I'll do kind of. Oh no, this is mountains. 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 And we'll go dark on the underside. So I'm kind of moving now into more of a, what a lot of people would consider contrast comp, or a value comp, where you're trying to figure out the different values of things. And actually, these are going to be quite bright. And so, because they're kind of filled in, I am going to just mark them so that I know they're going to be quite a bit lighter in the background there, so that we have some pretty heavy contrast there. And then along the edges of this is going to be pretty bright as well. We'll keep this dark because this will be bright. Yeah, so that is pretty much how I would do that. Notice that took 20 to 30 minutes. I'd probably do it faster if I wasn't talking. But anyway, that's kind of the basic gist. Is I had a rough thumbnail and an idea, and then I experimented a little bit with a little bit bigger. This is maybe 4 inches tall by 4 or 5 inches wide, just to kind of figure out what's going on there. And then I played with that again. I'm coming actually from a bit of a higher angle here, and I can kind of give myself like some sort of sun situation that's getting broken up. The leaves, I like that idea. And then sometimes I'll even, just because different textures can help, I can come in with different color color pencils here. And that'll help me just, not necessarily like a color key, but just a basic idea of the color contrast that I'm going to have. Knowing that the forest is going to be the same, kind of in the same color family as the bushes. This up here. And so that gives you kind of an idea. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but it gives you kind of an idea of kind of this flow that's going on. We've got these two major shapes, and they're all a similar color. I've got to come in with something that will balance this out. This is going to be really pink, and so I probably want some pink down here. And so this might end up being some pink, so we have some diagonal balance and some asymmetry there. This will likely be very yellowish. And everything else will kind of be a green, blue, or kind of a light red, and so the yellow will stand out. So, anyway, that's that.